Hey, hello there. This is going to be a tutorial on how to build a new kind of embroidery tool. This is what we are going to build today. Like, you can create all kinds of logos and images with this one. But before we dive in, let's look at the embroidery tool we already have at Blender Market, which is this one. We did a little update and now you can choose different kinds of ways to do the masking. Like this one is using single stitches, just small ones. And how this works is that you can go to, now here we have everything organized into panels. And here you have to put in a mask and a color image, so you can get the colors and the masking of the stitches. And if we go in here, rendering, this is also one of them. You can go in here and open your image. We already have a few images of birds. This is one that I've generated with an AI tool, and I created also a mask from it in Photoshop. But now what you can also do is have a PNG with an alpha channel, and it can also use the alpha channel to cut out all the stitches. So it only uses the stitches where there is an image, and it takes away the alpha. And how that works is, I can show you here. Let's go to layout. Here we have to choose the image. Here you can see this is a normal PNG without the alpha, and it just fills in everywhere all the stitches. And if we also select the mask, a black and white mask, it takes away the outside. Here you can say toggle the plane, also toggle the background, so you can also use the cutout here, the mask. You can have a random or a grid fill. You can also up the vertices of the grid, so you get a lot more stitches here. But basically it looks nicest when you use a kind of random orientation. What it uses now, that's also a new feature, rotate by grayscale. So it takes the grayscale of your image and it rotates your stitches. What you can also do is rotate alignment. So it has aligned stitches all the same way. And here we can say which alignment we want. So we can say 45 degrees, it goes diagonal. We can say 90 degrees, it goes horizontal. And this way you have more, you can do more with the stitches than before. And here also what we have is mask by alpha. Now here it doesn't work because we use the PNG, but if we have no mask, but we have the PNG of the bird, it's using now the alpha of the PNG, and you don't need to create a separate mask for it in black and white. So that is how the regular embroidery tool works that we already have on Blender Market. And now let's dive into how to build this new one. You can see already how it works. It works a little bit different than the previous one. It takes the color of an image. So as we go into rendering, here we have an image which we imported. It is also a PNG and it takes the alpha. So it only takes stitches where there is color, and it takes the color that is connected and it makes stitches on this whole color. So it doesn't make separate stitches, but one long stitch across the color. As you can see here, the stitch goes from here all the way to here. And if we go into the shading mode, you can even see how this embroidery is built up. And I'm gonna walk you through how to do this. So if we dive into the nodes, like here, I'm starting off with a simple grid. Let's take this viewer node, go into it. We go also into the preview mode. First we start with this grid, and we need this grid to put on the image. So we have here two images. we only need one actually, because we're using an alpha. This is also a masking one that I also use like in the other embroidery tool. But here we're going to use the PNG with the alpha. As you can see, we take the alpha, we use a invert boolean not, and then delete the images. So as we drag this one over, like it's pretty slow now, so I'm gonna scale it down to 100. As you can see here, we have 100 vertices. It was higher. Here you can see if I up this value, you get a lot more vertices, but for now, to make everything work fast, I put it to 100. So as you can see, I put this over here. Let's go into this preview mode. What I first did was delete all the surrounding geometry. So if we go here, you can see it takes away all the alpha. Then the next thing that we do is we set the position and we just make an offset by the color. So you have different colors with different grayscales in this image, and I'm using also the UV map of this grid, and here you don't need to rotate it. I rotated it a little bit to get different kind of stitches, but you don't have to do that. You can use this vector rotate to slightly rotate it. But here it uses the image and then goes into a map range. I set it to stepped linear, so I can set the amount of steps that I want this image to have. And then you see that it creates an offset of this image by grayscale. So you get different levels. And then next I delete just by the planar normal of the images. So here I say select only the edges that are X and Y, so that are going this way, and everything that's going up and down is not used. So now you see we have a few images or a few edges over here that are also being used. You can also use it by normal. Here I use the normal, everything that is up, but I found that using the X and Y, I made a note here. This is how it works. So I take the position 1 and 2 of the edge vertices and then subtract them. I use the absolute, and then I program a switch, and I use an equal. Here you see it's the X, the Y, and the Z. So you can choose, you have the epsilon of 0.1. You can choose which one to tick, and it sends them through the switch. And here by the OR node of the Boolean, I combine them into the output. And that's how it works for the XYZ edge selection. So here you can see I put on the viewer, set position, I set position again, and then I use a multiply the position, and I multiply the X and Y, but not the Z, so everything goes back to 0. And if I go into the next part, so this is just to separate the different colors. So this is the green color, and this is the black color that you see in the logo. And if we go in here now, I first delete some geometry, which is the Y geometry, so I'm only left with the X geometry. So I want my lines to go horizontal only. I can also flip this by using the X geometry. Let's see if this works. If I tick this off and then use the X, they're going vertically. But let's use the Y geometry here. It's the same node as this one, so if I go into it, you see the same thing. Then I make mesh to curve, so all these lines become curves. Like in the viewer you don't see any difference, but it creates a curve from it. And then here I create a store named attribute with color, and I use color and spline, And then I take the image color, and it gives all these lines, all these splines, their own color based on the average of the image. So then a whole spline gets one color output. If you do it more before, then it takes the lines or the color of the points, and then you get a lot of different colors in your image. But I want every stitch line to be their own color, so that's why it's over here. And then next I use an extend edge, and by that I can extend a little bit the edges and fill in the gaps. So the gaps that you create before by deleting geometry here are filled now by extend edge, and this is how that works. So here you can choose mesh or curve. You don't need to use that, you can just put it through, then capture the curve tangent, and then I'm using that tangent to set the position. And here you can see I use an endpoint selection, so I use the ends of the curves and then extend them. So here you can see I multiply here by -1, and here I multiply it by 1 and no -1, and then it's both in the same extent left and right, so you can extend the edges left and right. If we go in here, I can put 1, and I'm extending one side a lot. It takes a while, so you can see, and here you can extend the other side. So I hope you can understand how this works just by multiplying the curve tangent that I grab before, so capture attribute before setting the position, and then putting them into the multiply. And here I flip it into the other direction. So that's how the extend edge works. Then next what I do, I create curve to mesh and extrude the mesh a little bit. Here you can see what happens. Now it's better to take this one. That's after resampling the curve. So here the curve still has a lot of points, but I make it 2 points. So it's from one side to the other, it only has 2 points. And then when I extrude them, they go down a little bit. So if you have a fabric, like the curve goes through the fabric, and then you can get a nice arc. So we extrude it. Here you can see without extrusion it doesn't go through the fabric, and here it goes through the fabric, and then we go from mesh to a curve again. And then when we set spline to Bezier, you can see that now nothing happens, but when I set the handle position, so I push them a little bit up so it gets an arc, put it into the viewer. Here you can see that it gets this little arc. So it becomes a little bit like stitches, that there is tension in the thread. What happens then? I resample the curve again. This is a more advanced way of doing it, that you really get stitches that rotate, that are made up of multiple threads. But a quicker way to do it is to resample the curve. Then I use to capture the spline factor or spline parameter, and I use the length to be able to make a UV for it. So here we capture the length of the curves here, and then here I combine it into a curve mesh. If we go into here, you can see, well, you can't really see that it's resampled, but I resample it by the length of 0.01 meters. And then here I use a little noise to set the curve radius. There's no radius yet. You see that when you make the curve into a mesh. And here I'm using an arc. And I'm using an arc because the arc is open. I use it 360, so it's a circle, but a circle with an opening, so you can it's an easier way to make the UVs, because you can unfold it by using this capture attribute and then use the spline parameter. So if we plug this one in, you can see that it has, this is by the noise and the position and the map range. I make it from 0.8 to 2. Set the curve radius, so you see that it has a little bit of randomness to it. And here then I capture and combine these capture attributes lengths, and that creates the curve UVs. So if we go into here, we set the material, we have the material called stitches, and then go into a preview mode. Here you can see that the threads are winding around, and that is done by this store attribute curve UVs. If we go into the shading, here you can see we are using the color. The color was captured here by the sample nearest surface. So it's the spline that is nearest the color on the surface. So that's what's happening here. Capture the color and put it into a color attribute. And then here we set the color. And here we are also using the curve UV. And we use this curve UV. We slightly rotate it, as you can see here. Now everything is aligned, but I'm using 50 degrees to make it wind around. So you see a diagonal here. And then use a wave texture with a scale of 200, a distortion of 4, detail of 4, and by this you get a randomness also in the threads. With the color ramp and the bump, I give it this bump normal, that you see that it's individual wires, and I use also the color to mix it and give it a little bit of darkness in the creases. If I turn this one off, you see there's no creases. When I turn it on all the way, it's really black. When we go back to 0.5, it's just the right color, to my opinion. And here you can see what happens. Now we get a really nice stitchings, nice embroidery of this logo. And if we go back into the geometry nodes, we were here, we set the material of this of these stitches, and then also I'm using a subdivision to make everything more smooth. And then what I'm also doing is joining it with backplate. I can just turn this one off actually. Here you can see this is the backplate, and now you can see why I had a higher resolution. So if we put this to 300, we get a nice stitch all over. And when I turn this one off with M, I mute the delete geometry node that is using the alpha. We get a embroidery stitch everywhere. Okay, here you can see that we have the logo, but I can also show you what happens with the bird. Here I have the PNG bird that is using the alpha, just like in the other example, and here you can see all the stitches appear. And now it's a little bit out of bounds. If I put this one back to 0, it doesn't rotate and it doesn't go out of bounds. Here you can see that you get a lot longer stitches per color. What you can also do is like take away the amount of levels of colors. It still works with 2, but with 1 the lines become longer. Let's see what happens at 0. Yeah, and then you get really long lines. So if I put this a little bit higher and higher and higher, you see that the image gets more detail. So you can play around with the levels here by the map range. But this is a new way to do the stitch embroidery. I'm gonna make it a tool. I'm gonna put it already up for Blender Market, so you can download it there and take it all apart. You can see here how to make it yourself. I will be adding features and then put them on Blender Market as well. But if you want to build it yourself, you can go through all these nodes. I can also show you here the really heavy example. If I take this one away, no, I need this one. This is the back plate. And when you use these nodes that are in the top, this becomes really heavy because it makes the individual strands. I'm not sure that every computer can handle this. You can see here that it's really winding all the stitches. Probably take this out in future versions because it's just too heavy and it becomes unworkable. And I think that this one looks better anyway. So that is the new embroidery, and I hope this is useful for a lot of people, and I keep you up to date. Okay, bye.